So do we have a motion to adjourn? Dawn, do we have a second?
Support.
Barb, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Now we're ready for the.
Call the meeting back to order for a work session, so like we would have normal work session.
So right, to put us back into.
We have to approve the agenda.
Okay, do I have it?
We don't.
Here, I have a,
Okay.
use this.
Good. Okay, I wanna call the special meeting to order and, wanna approve the agenda, so do we have, approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Ken,
Support it.
Nick, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Let's see, do we have recognition of visitors and hearing of people?
Dana spoke to me during the changeover and he
Okay,
no longer needs to. be.
okay, sounds good. So then we have a discussion item here, and we have that's the scope of the future bond, so I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Manning.
Thank you. I just want to give the board an opportunity. We were here tonight. I know we're missing a couple members that were excused this evening. But we come together next week, Monday, and trying to make a lot of big decisions. And I feel like I want to give you an update on the work that's taken place since our last work session, before our next work session, so you can kind of process. We talked about 4 buckets. We talked about what those buckets could look like, how we can maybe adjust buckets or pick and choose from buckets. They weren't selective to, you have to pick 3 or these, it was just, that's how I framed it. So there's still things within the budget that can be added, deleted, changed, things like that. So I do want to thank our partners from OAK. Adam Tweedy's here tonight. He's back with us. GMB, there's a lot going on. So we've been working with GMB and OAK on all of this work. We got the bucket conversation based on Adam's work with estimating what this would look like from escalation, if we do project later, to go from there. There were 2 things that I wanted to discuss with the board. We'll go into detail again about this, about following Monday, but I didn't want to wait till then to have this conversation.
Dr. Benedict, you just mentioned about a meeting on Monday, is that a meeting with?
We have our next work session.
A week from
A week from Monday,
Not
okay,
next
yeah,
Monday,
right,
the
okay.
following, I think
Right,
it's 10
okay.
days from now, maybe?
Yeah, exactly,
Does
okay.
that sound right? I'm
Okay,
sorry.
yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
So we want to try to lay out what this could look like. I did have an opportunity to talk to Mr. DeWitt and Mrs. Hennis because I knew they weren't going to be here. So I updated them exactly what I'm update you about tonight, just to give them time to process going from there. We realized that the 4 buckets were not manageable with the dollar amount that we could acquire without raising the tax rate. There's still some numbers that we're trying to finalize about what that number could be, but we didn't want to get too tight, too close to that number where it's like, now we're nervous about bids coming in, and we want to have some flexibility within that scope. There's 2 other components that we heard. Number 1, we heard a little bit about the idea of a administration building and how those that maybe work or spend time in this building recognize the need, but it's a greater conversation with the community. It's really not a priority to say, how does this impact kids? Now, we can look at it from a board situation, professional development, administrative offices, and how that supports kids, but it's farther away from the classroom. So we had some ideas that we discussed. One of them being, is it possible to, instead of building an administration building, should we incorporate this conversation about if we remodel the early childhood center, should we move the administration building or services over to the administration, over to this ECC? That is contingent on building 2 early childhood centers, still bringing CTE to the ECC. Sorry, you understand what that means, I know everybody does. But if we do that, is there square footage in that facility so we can both dance together in that facility, along with technology and keeping the pickleball courts where they are, right? So we don't want to mess with that. So we started to have that conversation. The initial conversation was the cost of renovating it for, what's the word, it's not high impact, remodeling, there's
Like a heavy renovation?
heavy renovation, because of the offices look, it's not like a classroom that just, the walls are different, you really have to do some heavy renovation. The initial was, the cost might be pretty close to just building another building. However, after revisiting the idea, I think we can get it substantially less, just because of the square footage and how we break up the building. Right now, our next step is to look at programming for CTE, to make sure that we don't, limit that by having the administration there also. I think there's enough room right now, and it might very well be a great conversation with the board to process, to say, if we put the administration building over there, and not building, but we renovate it so that there's a boardroom, and there's offices, and there's community areas, and there's pickup, you can stop in the administration building, that you're not walking through the CTE area. We think we can do some of that work. We have some preliminary drawings that, GMB have, developed. If we can do that, and we still have an opportunity to move a lot of programming for, CTE over there, maybe as that continues to grow over years, not months, but years, as that grows, then the need could be like, okay, now we have to get out of there and build a building, but that could be 10 years down the road.
Yep.
Right, as we dip our toe into this, we really don't know the full impact this scope could have on local businesses, our student population, neighboring student populations, and how we could be kind of on the leading edge of bringing in a true CTE program, not for the ISD, not for the region, but for Hudsonville Public Schools. So that was a conversation we had. It does not knock off $70 million off the price tag, which fits within the mold. But that was something that might be attainable without the perception of spending money on a building for administrators as opposed to building for kids.
So would there be an opportunity to move tech here if you needed the space?
I think that's a great question, and I'm gonna initially say no. Primarily because of the
Infrastructure?
fiber and lines that go in, generator, all of the components, the expense of moving tech here would be substantial. And by the way, the renovation for administrative offices as well as CTE includes tech staying where they are, some renovations in there to kind of give them some more space and clean things up. It really, it's a dance between three that I think is, quite frankly, might not be a bad idea to have some of the administration buildings, and then you have another fluid area of the district that kids are coming and going. We're starting to have more conversations about what this could look like. Is it, we right now think of CTE as 11th and 12th graders, but what if this turns into true CTE for 6th to 12th graders? It could be a robotics conversation that we have with more opportunities for kids at the middle school level. It's just the ideas, and today we had a focus group with business leaders, and their minds were they're like, wow, we have businesses that want to say, how can we support what you're doing? We can't just say, hey, can we get X amount of millions of dollars, but the partnership, the relationship, not just the exposure, but the maybe just a wider range of opportunities that our kids can even know are out there. Most of our kids have heard of Royal Technologies, they don't realize it's right down the street. And the number of jobs and opportunities, it's not just engineering, there's people on the floor, there's people in administrative offices, there's people all over. It was a great conversation, but I want to let you know that was a conversation. I remember Dr. Hooper making a comment, we need an administration building. And we thought, maybe we can do this in a way that reduces the cost, but has the same impact of supporting. So that was one thing. Any questions on that?
How many business people did you have involved in this conversation?
Today we had 12. We had 13 signed up, 12 showed up.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was, I can go through each one, but it was all over the board.
Is there any way we can leverage the support that they're talking about and the excitement that they might have with this concept into them, publicly stating those things?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think those are bond campaign conversations.
Right.
And I had one of them today with one of the local
Right.
businesses that's pretty prominent in the
Mhm.
Hudsonville area.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what do we need to do? And a lot of times, their support comes more with conversational when people catch them that want their opinions.
Uh-huh.
They don't have to put a big billboard up that says, we support this, but for them to say, you know what, we wanna be part of this, people ask them questions. I think it's exciting, the opportunities that it could open up. I think the robotics area at our high school is really kind of neat. The e-sports, but just this breadth of what we can do with opportunities for kids.
Dr. Vanderjagt and I were talking earlier today, I'm sure some of you saw that the Kent ISD just purchased Dutton School or something, and they're gonna be turning that into a campus for this, so I think this really is a huge part of this bond.
And I do wanna preface this. I did have one of the focus groups that Pat and I were at, there was a concern about ECC and what it means to the community, the city, the families that live in the city. Living in the city is a different experience than living in a subdivision. Our kids in our subdivision might ride bikes, but eventually they leave that subdivision and go to another one. The city isn't like that. They're all subdivisions. This is the whole area, so riding on bikes, doing things, the stuff that it's doing. So are we gonna lose our ECC because they wanna build it really fancy out on the outside? The answer is, we might have ways to do both. So I wanna get engaged with those families to talk about what are some things that they're thinking, that maybe we can address before we go too far down this road. Some I think we can address, others we have to work on solutions, but we had this similar situation when we put the 5-6 building up. It was about start times and about traffic flow, and we tried to come up with ideas of getting the buses off the main roads, and I think those are conversations we can have, but I just don't, I want to acknowledge that just because, some people think putting 2 early childhoods to really captivate the districts as a south and north, there's still a contingent here that we need to listen to and talk to about what are some concerns and how can we address, what if the CTE truly had some early childhood, instruction going on that kids are a part of also and led, and now the littles are there. And there could be 2 classrooms that are there. We wanna keep the playgrounds because we want families to have a place to go, not just Hughes Park, but they can go to this facility. We wanna keep the pickleball courts there. We wanna add some parking. Those are things I think we can do from a community aspect. Also respect that that building it's not the cornerstone of our district, but it kind of has some nostalgia to our district. We wanna acknowledge that and recognize it.
Is there enough room on that property for everything we're talking about?
There is. The only challenge would be there's a couple ball diamonds there that are not exactly,
I haven't seen any
fit
of
their
them.
quality.
Yeah, there in a long
Whatever
time.
Lake Michigan, whatever the
Yeah.
ballpark is.
Yeah.
We might have to commandeer some of that, but I think we've got some great ideas, and I know OAK has got some great ideas behind design and renovations, and GMB's having the same conversation. We're getting into, the weeds a little bit, but not yet.
Is there any aspect of having remorse over maybe not picking up a couple more properties by the high school, that we were talking about at one time, that we could use if we wanted to keep the ECC in the city?
Yeah,
And
I would say, that's a great question, because we've talked a little bit about the parking situation. I don't think so. I think we're at a pretty good capacity for parking. The one conversation will be about events that we host. We have a very attractive, high school campus. We can host a major event in the field house as well as a major swim meet in the pool. On top of that, band competition in the main gym, and it's an easy flow. It's just interesting how that works. But it starts to fill up. If we do something with an indoor facility, on that same campus, that adds the same conversation, and I'll talk about that.
So, in thinking about positioning possibly the admin building and CTE, the other thing that I think the city had talked about, and I don't know how close it's come, is that there was potentially going to be a bus stop not far from.
Train stop. Start at the bus stop, turns into a train stop. Yep.
Okay, that I see some
Right there.
positives right there, and I like the fact that it would no longer be an ECC space just for people coming and going, so that part of it appeals to me. But what is?
Having older kids there as opposed to littles.
Yes,
that kind of thing.
yes, exactly, yeah. but what is the thought about this building then? As far as what this would be utilized for?
Is that how you do it?
Well,
Yeah, make sure everybody's out, get some cats out and.
To your earlier question about, tech being here, this building has, outgrown its bones. I mean, it just does not have great bones anymore, so renovating it, that's been an issue, so it really doesn't facilitate doing much with it. We've looked at that, and looked at that, and looked at that, it just needs,
So it'd be
It's tired.
more use to park school, either for additional parking or if necessary, additional.
The
space.
one conversation that we have had informally, and this is still, I'm not gonna say off the record, very informal conversation. But if this building is no longer needed on this site, we can open up opportunities more for bus flow, maybe parking, maybe more playground. But then if we get rid of the portables, maybe there's an opportunity to divide that land up a little bit next door and maybe work with Habitat for Humanity on building affordable housing right there as a project also for our community.
Mhm.
Adding a property for a homeowner, and doing it in concert with the school. That's right next door, that's between us and the youth home.
Okay.
Does that make
And
sense?
that would also give the city back some more taxable
That's
property,
correct.
which would be,
That's correct. The property, you don't need it to be as deep.
right,
All those properties are 200 plus,
Yeah.
right? They don't need to be that deep, but, we can divide it up and then maybe get something back and work with, and it'll be nice for the community too, to have a project that our kids can work on, some of our
Mm.
local, churches and organizations, and it could be a good partnership. We've talked informally with the Habitat one. The other conversation, which I think is maybe a heavier lift, is the 5-6 building on the, south end of the district. As you recall, when we built the 5-6 on the north end, there was an enrollment challenge between, Georgetown and Bauer had portable classrooms. Baldwin Middle School was, over capacity. And we were over capacity, based on calculations with Park Elementary as well as Alder. We do not have that same challenge on the south end of the district, so we talked about if we do a building on the south end, maybe we do that later in the bond, work. Or do we remove that from the option and then, put that in a future bond on its own to say, listen, if enrollment blew up down there, it's 7 years down the road from now, and the board's like, you know what, let's just go ask for one building right here without raising the tax rate, it'll be, it's doable. However, we think that, I'm not gonna pick on Nick, but I think you brought up, are there some other options for doing something on that part of the district? So we took a look at, what if we tried to do the programming part of it first before we put the building up? So what happens if we did some renovations to Jamestown Upper and looked at that building to say, let's turn that into a 5-6 building? We'd have to do something, a little bit work with the offices. We don't wanna put too much into it, in all honesty, because we want it to be a 5-6 so that we can program similar to the other 5-6. But what if we did that so that years down the road, when the board did say, all right, now let's put up a building, the programming is already there. Now it's just, you're shifting to a different building. We would have to increase capacity at Jamestown lower and do a little bit of work there to make it a K-4 building versus a K-2 building. We have footings already laid there. Financially, it's substantially different. You're looking at, instead of 67 million?
Yeah, 67 to under 10.
Yeah, under 10. So that is something that is possible to entertain. It's a little bit of a different sell from being on the south end of the district, saying, why aren't we getting a new building? But I don't know if we could go to Treasury and even get approval for a new building with the enrollment the way it is. We did get our enrollment projections. The problem with them is they give you district-wide projections. They don't tell you north and south. That's up to us to try to figure out. There are some speculations that, there's a decline in enrollment throughout the state. The projections are kind of telling us we're pretty stagnant, over the course of time. Nobody's really growing because of the housing market. Clearly, that could change if all of a sudden, I think Pat had mentioned in one of our focus groups, if there's a flip in a subdivision where all the empty nesters are like, all right, now's our time, we're out, and 12 families move in with 24 kids, it looks different. But right now, it's pretty expensive to move in, to our area, to go from there. So
Yeah.
that was,
I really, I like that from the standpoint of, and when Nick brought it up too, is that that's the one hurdle that it's hard for me to get over and explain to people, is that since 2018, we've been kind of the same. And especially if projections don't show us, you know, getting a big bump, I think we tell people originally, if we decide to do this, we were really looking at this because we thought it was the best thing to do, to have 5/6 on both sides, but from a financial perspective, we just can't come to you and say that's the best thing right now. That's what where we determined to go.
we still might be able to program it.
Yeah, right,
And that was the
exactly.
idea that you had mentioned about doing something with upper, and it does change a little bit, but it keeps the kids at lower from, it wouldn't be called Jamestown lower, probably a good idea to call it like Jamestown North or something,
Mhm.
because it's on the north side there, make it a K-4 building, just some ideas, so I just wanted to give you some of those thoughts before we get into, the following Monday, so 10 days from now, because, we're not expecting final decisions, but I don't wanna keep, you know, if we only meet once a month, then sometimes it's like, all right, what's taking place in that meantime, so.
I appreciate you getting on that so quick, and I was interested when I threw it out, so that is a pretty significant cost difference, which is a good thing for us to consider, and I like the idea, this is almost like an interim thing, where, hey, this is what we can do now, we always talk about.
If our numbers, I think that's not only just the dollars, like you said, but if our numbers come in that we continue to increase on the south side, then it is much more plausible to add another whole facility.
Yeah.
But again, that whole thing of what the state allows you to do, short-term projection, it would be pretty hard to justify that over, you know, whatever else might be somewhat, over air conditioning.
We might even.
You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
mean, that, you gotta say to people, well, do you want air conditioning? So then this is our middle ground here for.
It might very well be to that point that it allows us to program, and we could actually program for a 5/6 facility with K-4 at Jamestown while a building is being built.
Right.
Where before, we had to wait for the building to be done before we made this shift, so, it might be able to kind of cross off, two issues.
It'd be really interesting to find out, and I know you've got your focus groups, and I don't know whether they're specifically geared to areas of our district, but it would be really helpful to gauge a little bit of the parents' thoughts on that option.
It is
Because
not a conversation of focus groups, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Yes,
but I do feel that there are questions we can ask in our SOAR survey that might not drive strategic planning, but we can inform and ask some of those
Yeah.
questions also, as opposed to just having a separate survey. We
right,
can ask a couple questions in
Yeah.
there that about,
yeah.
and same thing with conversations about athletics.
Because it's that whole conversation about equity, which we're very sensitive to, and we really want to work towards. But if our numbers don't show that the south side can support yet a separate 5/6 building, I think it's reasonable to say, but here is an alternative to make it as similar as possible.
And that, these are just some ideas after the feedback we got initially from the board. I would encourage you, if there are other questions or thoughts, please let me know, so we can, you know, we meet regularly to go through this stuff as fast as we can to give you the best information. I think there are more steps to having conversations with community members, to your point, asking, I wanna get into, some different areas in the south end of the district to have conversations about what that looks like. I think one of the biggest issues that remain, we learned this last night, again, is all of our athletic facilities are all in the central or north part of the district. So how can we build some equity with that also? And I think there are some ideas that we had, that we presented a week or 2 weeks ago, that did address, so it's, you know, you start to move, lacrosse or soccer, you just have a facility, track down there. Now you have an early childhood center down there, you're doing some, I think it's, to acknowledge that, there's a lot taking place on both ends of our district. I will also tell you that, had some preliminary conversations about an indoor facility and what that could look like. We're having conversations about, you know, the scope of that, and I talked to, some business owners in the downtown area, I'll say, about what are your thoughts? And there was a very positive feel for, we want the high school to remain the cornerstone of our district where people want to come to. And you see that from athletic standpoint, from fine arts standpoint, that people are attracted to that facility. One of the best robotics areas that people are going to, I know Granville has a whole building, but the way our building is set up, they can do more robotics there because of the gym is just so much bigger. Not the field house, but the actual main gym, the central gym. And so I was concerned that it's like, is that too much? And we're like, no, we want people to know that this is a destination to come to. It's right off the highway. It's a nice facility. So I think, there was some anxiety having conversation, kind of going back and forth. I think we'll continue to get feedback on that. We did talk, are there other ways to maybe ask our community, would you be in support of all of this and this, or to put it together? I think those are conversations the board can have about what do we want this, truly the final scope to look like. And go from there. So that's kind of, I just wanted to update you. I didn't want to take too much of the time tonight, but give you some things to, let's say, chew on, ask questions, and then we'll come back in about 10 days with kind of, not a final scope, but here's where
Well,
we
the
are now.
numbers attached to it, again, after we see those other numbers, and to say, okay, with these adjustments, what can we save, and how much closer are we to what we think is realistic?
I think the numbers we are right now, since you asked,
Did you?
You know.
the numbers where we have it right now, and there still can be a little bit of tweaking, but it's right around 256 million. We know we can acquire that without raising the tax rate. It's tight. I think we could probably max out at 259. Asking under that is certainly possible. The board just has to decide, do we want that even lower? I think we can have conversations of getting it a little bit lower. To me, 249 is kind of a nice number. I know we can ask for more than that, but we're talking about wants versus needs. I think there's a lot of needs in here. There are some wants, clearly, but when you have so many different components of this, we have board members that want other things that others need, so that's our community, right? That's our parents.
I think it's important that we're able to show the evolution of thinking from where we started 3 or 4 months ago, or 6 or 8 months ago, all the way to where we are right now, and how we got there, and the things that we've considered with the feedback that we've gotten from the community. And I think, like the 5-6 building, okay, we're looking at the administration building, we're looking at a different thing there. And so I think people will know and understand that it just wasn't, a quickly, arrived at thing with no changes being made, but it's evolved based on feedback from the community.
That's a great point, and Joy had mentioned that also when I talked to her, that she's gotten some feedback. She was at the Early Childhood Center, was asking some questions about, and there's some anxiety about what does this look like from a programming standpoint. When you look at a large district and what we can offer, all of a sudden you start branching things off. People are like, well, why can't you offer that anymore? Because we don't have the volume to do it. So what does that look like? So I think we want to have conversation. I think we're starting to get closer to, now we have to have more programming issues about what does CTE look like from an instructional standpoint to accessibility, opportunity, all of those conversations we're getting. It's not just how many offices do you need, how many classrooms. Even the 5-6 building, right, designing it was the easy part. Programming for it was the challenge, and they're still fine tuning that, and we're 3 years in.
Yeah, I'm much more comfortable and confident with what I'm hearing now, based on everything else that we heard too. And I thought that the whole process was outstanding from the beginning. But just the adjustments you've been able to make over the last couple of 3 weeks have been impressive to me. And like I said, it just paints a picture and shows people that we're very serious-minded about this, and we're not just spending money willy-nilly. We're we're looking at our best bang for the dollar and what we can justify.
And from the board standpoint, if you hear of things, feel free to let me know, or who to contact, who to touch base. I'll meet with anybody to have the conversation. You know, having the conversation that if we don't do anything, that the taxes will fall off the books. Technically, eventually they will, years down the road, and what condition are the buildings in at that point is the challenging question.
You
So,
can't
you know,
build a building in 2 years, if all of a sudden you need it, and now it's like, oh, hey, well, now we have to start from scratch.
yeah, and that gets more expensive.
Yes.
Right, so there are things that we can do now, but I do wanna be cognizant of the, you know, the amount of taxes that people pay. Clearly businesses pay a substantial, increase on homestead, but, what does that look like from a district standpoint? And are we using their dollars wisely? The last bond issue, I know the board has seen some of this, but we spent around 28 to 29% on athletics last bond issue. And some people feel because the field house is off of 32nd, that we spent all of the money on the field house. We were very intentional about, it doesn't look like it was, I'm gonna say nickel and dime, but we were intentional how we built that. In this, the proposal that we're discussing, we're closer to 22% about athletics. If we go to 0, which is perfectly fine, that's a conversation to have, but then that impacts a certain population. I do feel, I know, districts, there's a district around us that went after a bond just now, it was 100% athletics. That's all it was. That's a little, I think we have a lot of things we can do instructionally, from classroom furniture, air conditioning, playgrounds. Those are some of the things that are in this that are impacting all of our kids.
And we're not breaking new ground on anything we're proposing. I mean, Jennison, Spring Lake, then they just both added indoor facilities.
Kentwood.
Yeah,
one
but I mean,
going up
even in
around
our own
Iowa.
backyard, you know.
Yeah, I think, if we toured the community through the Baldwin Street Middle School library chairs,
Yeah.
we would pass this in easily.
Yeah.
Shark Tank.
Shark Tank chairs were awesome.
They were quick to, I think they
We're
picked the
missing
worst one, like, you don't have to convince him.
We talked about that today.
One
We
of the
moved them
legs-
from Baldwin to Riley, so they're used for both Shark Tanks.
Literally, one of the legs fell off a table as they were moving it.
Mhm.
I wanted to make sure I saw it.
It's-
Guys,
it's time.
Yeah,
You don't need to convince us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's funny you say that. My first year teaching was a long time ago, and the first summer I worked for a tech company, and I installed the Apple IIes at Baldwin.
What are those
First year
access
of Baldwin.
points?
What are the ball ones that had the?
Oh.
Put the access points in them with her too.
Yep, and I was patching cabinets, at Baldwin Street Middle School up until 4:30 in the morning, the day before school started at Baldwin. And that's the original furniture.
Hey, you probably moved some of those chairs.
They were great at the time. They were heavy, they're still heavy, but now
They are
Oh.
rough.
they're tired, right? And I think, you know, we were talking about this the other day, or today, we put a new sign on Forest Grove Elementary on the gym exterior. It's amazing what that does. The kids would think that's the coolest thing, because it took a building from 1960 to saying, we're proud of it. It's not just some old stencil. Forest Grove, it might be minimal, but it's pretty neat to be proud of what you're doing. So I think the board has been very, very effective in financially managing not just the bond issue, but the expectations and wants versus needs. And I think you all hit different components in our community, that you're a great opportunity to hear things, say things, and be able to relay and be a good conduit, so.
Well, and Ken and Dawn, you know, I mean, being part of the last bond issue, and that came out so well that's, you know, those are things that we can go out there too and say, oh, we've got people that have been involved in these things in the past, and they've learned also from what they might have done or not done in the last time.
Yeah.
I think it's all good.
Probably the last 3 bonds,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
you probably more than that. Yeah, when it first came out, I think it was a bond.
Oh.
So the bond masters. you know.
So you bought the chairs.
No, he did.
Sure Ken did.
They're good chairs.
It's,
It'll last you a long time.
anything to add on that?
Actually.
No, I just think that the focus of, I saw resonating with the parents and the focus groups was just that when the 5-6 building was built, just a real pressure point was space, was enrollment. And that was what was happening, and, the team just found a way to program around it, and the keep them younger longer resonated with parents. So all that fit, but it was really about the north being just packed. I mean, we were so packed. And then, now, another pressure point is curriculum alignment with, even within that building, being able for Amy and her team to be able to really dive in and make it the word something, that level of programming. Right now, she's got to keep, the 6th a little bit like south, and the 5th a little bit like it's on south, so it's hard even within that building. This would give us the ability to do more in that building and make the south more like the north. It would really help, curriculum alignment.
And I think that's one of the great things to say that, maybe our enrollment doesn't show this. And because of that, we're not asking for a whole new building. But we also understand that we have to, tie both ends in to doing the same thing, which will be more efficient also and save us money on the other end. And so I think those are just the things that we gotta bring up, yeah.
To add on to that real quick, I can't stress enough how, what I would say, financially responsible it is to take advantage of space you already have. The most expensive part of the construction process is adding square footage. So by looking at things that we can take advantage of space you already have, it saves, you've seen it, we've gone, wildly down since our last conversation. So I think just to hit on that to you guys, that is such a responsible move, and it makes a lot of sense. So I think financially it's done wonders for this, and I think goes a long way.
Thank you all. We'll have more, and if there are other questions that you have, we'll try to, get the landing gear out on the plan at least. We might not land the plane on that Monday, but we'd like to at least be cleared for approach.
Sounds good.
Okay?
Sounds good.
Great.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go around, Amy, do you have anything to say now? Okay.
No.
Next,
I'm good.
Dawn?
Happy Valentine's Day on Saturday. Enjoy it with those that you love, and let's hope this is the end of winter coming.
That's right.
Oh.
You say 50 next week, Barb, and have a safe trip to Ireland. Ken? Mandy? Pat?
No, nowhere.
Okay, great. And, so do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Dawn, second?
I'll support that.
Nick, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, okay, we are adjourned.